Nigerian tech-based company SeamlessHR is launching the Kenyan market. I'm here at the launch to speak to the CEO about one, why they're launching the Kenyan market, and two, how did they get the $10 million financing for their business? As we understand the automation of human resources in Africa. This is Founders Connect Africa. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you.
How are you finding Nairobi?
I love Nairobi. I love Nairobi a lot. I could move here.
You could move here.
Yeah.
And you've just launched your offices now officially in Nairobi.
Yes.
Why did you choose Nairobi?
Besides the fact that I love Nairobi again, we find that Kenya has the right population. Adoption of technology is quite high in Kenya as well. And Kenya also has structured businesses that will find automation valuable. Because you need to have businesses that are structured enough to be able to find automation valuable at scale for a market to be attractive to us. And so we find that Kenya has all of those factors. Has a serious government that's serious about compliance. All those things are attractive to us.
All right. Do you feel like there are a lot of Kenyan companies that are automating in terms of their HR processes?
I think African generally, their African companies could use more automation. And the reason is not really because African companies do not want to be automated, it's because not many people have been building tools for African companies to automate. So even if you look at the technology revolution we've seen in the last 5+ years in Africa, it's more fintech that you've seen rather than building tools for enterprise to automate. So for every probably 10 fintechs, you'll find one tool for enterprises to automate. So yeah, businesses in Africa may want to automate their processes, but no one is building those tools for them. And this is where we find opportunity. And this is where we also find meaning as a company. Really passionate about building tools for business to automate their resources. We've started with HR, but we also have R&D teams now working on procurement, for instance, where we're going to be automating procure-to-pay process, inventory, just to help businesses manage their resources better. So we're really passionate about automating the management of resources in Africa so that businesses can become more productive and successful.
All right. So you came to Kenya as a hub for East Africa.
Yes.
Which other markets are you looking at in the region, especially looking at Rwanda, DRC? Are you planning to enter there, or are you going to service your clients in Nairobi?
Yes, our regional HQ will be in Kenya. And from Kenya, we'll be selling into East Africa. So Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, actively. We're also looking at opportunities in DRC. Although DRC is usually considered as part of East Africa.
Yes, they recently joined the...
Yes. So this great opportunity in DRC that, has been sort of like a best kept secret for a while. So we're operationalizing that also from Kenya. And we also are going to do work in Ethiopia, but not immediately. There's still a few things that we have to put in place before we can actively work in Ethiopia, but that market is very attractive. 120 million people, significant opportunity in Ethiopia as well. But Kenya is our home in East Africa.
Okay. Which other countries are you looking at in Africa?
So we're building Pan-Africa across the entire continent. We, for instance, have registered our presence in South Africa. So we're taking the hub and spoke approach. We would have hub offices in regions across the continent. So the South African hub will be in Joburg, South Africa, but from there we were selling into Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Zambia, across the region. Then in the north, we don't have a presence in the north yet, but we're already exploring opportunities in Egypt. And most likely we'll have an hub office in Cairo that will sell into North Africa as well. And we also see opportunities in Francophone Africa. I'll be spending some time in Ivory Coast with my team in 2023 to sort of look at that, spend time learning more about the Francophone African opportunity. There's, of course, the language limitation, and we're following an Anglophone expansion first, but certainly we're going to do Francophone and Lusophone work as well. We really are interested in building for the continent, and you'll find us everywhere in the continent over time.
Okay, interesting. There's a lot of money coming into startups in Africa, and you're among one of the people who have been funded. How was the funding journey, especially for startups looking to get funding?
Yeah, it's a marathon, you know. I've been privileged to have been on both sides of like being funded, and I started my first startup in 2005. And at this time, there was no VC investment in Africa. So I'd sort of like run a startup without funding, and I've run a startup with funding. And I can tell you for free that it's better with funding. It's much better.
Yes.
And so we're thankful to the investment that's coming into the continent. If you look at the factors of production, land, labor, entrepreneur, and capital, we had the three factors before. Capital is the last that sort of like sparked the fire of productivity you're now seeing in tech in Africa. And so fundraising for us was more sort of like value driven. If you're creating value, you will be able to attract funding. Ultimately, I mean, you can call that old school, but I believe that everything comes down to value. You know, why I said old school is like you recent times you find like some startups might have raised money without value. Ultimately now those startups are paying for it, because ultimately if you don't have value, you can only go as far.
Yeah, we've
so
seen that in Kenya. Like more than 4 startups have started going down, and they have been given a lot of funding.
Yeah.
So it's a huge problem.
I mean, I can't speak. There are many reasons why startups fail, right? So it's not like every startup that failed wasn't focusing on value, right? But I think that focusing on value is critical to first of all attract funding, because investors are looking for value. And with SeamlessHR, there was enough value for investors to believe in what we're building. And I will always be grateful to my investors. I haven't built a company without funding. I'm full of gratitude that we're backed by good investors. And we have some of the best investors in the continent, TLCom, Lateral Capital, Enza Capital, and these investors are in Kenya, actually downstairs at the event this evening. Some of our investors will be there. I'm very grateful to them for that support that has really helped us scale.
Are you looking for more money?
Certainly, you know, we're not actively raising right now because, I mean, we only just raised and we're very careful with spending. But, you know, when we raised, actually, we then got called by investors all over the world. Everybody investing in our space around the world, all the big investors reached out. So I do have a long Rolodex of investors in the US, in Europe, in East, like China, and, you know, far places, Japan, interested in SeamlessHR, such that if we wanted to raise again now, it would be very easy for us to raise. And for us as a company, we're building towards the next raise, because with, you know, capital, like I said, is the spark. And you have capital, you grow to a particular level. To spark you to the next level, you need more capital. And so we will raise again, most likely 2023, towards the end of the year, 2024. We will raise. What we raise is our Series A. We're going to raise a Series B, maybe in a year's time. But we're fine now. You know, we really don't need to raise now, and we're good. Yeah.
Yes. Where do you see automation in Africa going? And based on some of the works you've done in Africa, do you feel like companies are now realizing? And I know that COVID accelerated the digital transformation. But where do you see that going forward in the next probably 3 years?
I mean, I'll say that it's an inexorable, you know, it's a match forward. There's no going back now, right? There's not going to be a time when the world will use less technology. The world is going to adopt more and more technology. Our lives are being, you know, technology is playing more important roles in our lives as individuals, and that's also transmitting to companies as well. So it can only go up for companies using automation. Like you alluded to, the pandemic also helped get more companies interested in technology. And we also saw a bump, in demand for our software because companies are now more serious about technology on the heels of the things that the pandemic did. And just also because as companies grow bigger, they will need automation. So we find a lot of opportunity in the mid-market to large enterprise. In the small enterprise space, I am a bit of a skeptic when it comes to, I think that small businesses shouldn't use automation just for the sake of automation. I think that they should use automation that solves problems for them. And so, automation is necessary for small businesses, but it just has to be automation that is built to solve problems because small businesses don't have a lot of disposable income. And so the money you have, you should spend it on tools that you really, really, really need. And so we're more focused on the mid-market to large enterprise space. But we're seeing a lot of people now playing the small business space more. And as we grow, we will turn our attention to small businesses. It's necessary. We have to play in the small business space. We find small businesses who use our software today, but these are small businesses who are growing very fast. So they're like, oh, we're at 30 employees now, we're in a year, we're at 90, we're at 100. So those businesses are structured well enough to need us, and they get on board very fast. But we will also focus on small business space down the line. But now we're more focused on the mid-market to large enterprise.
Okay, so that's the future. That's
Yes,
the future
absolutely.
for you. That's for your company. Okay, where do you see the startup space as well going forward in Africa? Do you still see a lot of money being poured in this?
Absolutely,
in this
absolutely.
continent?
I mean, there's a slowdown globally now, but even now, I think this year we're going to see more investments in Africa than last year. So despite the slowdown in funding in the continent or globally. So I mean, like I said, my first startup was in 2005. So I've seen a really, really small space, and I can appreciate the difference right now. I am bullish, 100% bullish on the future of the startup space in Africa. There's going to be more investment coming. We've not even seen anything yet.
We haven't seen. What would be your advice to a small business that's really looking to grow, looking for funding? What would be your atmosphere?
I mean, there's a lot of things one can say about small businesses, right? But I would echo something I've already mentioned about value. I mean, you must be doing something valuable in the world. Because, people exchange cash for value. And value is really solving problems. And, what I would say is that for any business, I think you spend more time understanding the problem. Solutions are very simple. It's problems that are complex. And it's very possible for you to build a solution that doesn't solve a problem. And that's not valuable. It's focusing on problems so that you understand the problems very well. And you can build a solution that really actually solves problems. If you do that, money will come. And with money comes everything else.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.